Hello and welcome. I am Katherine Krupka, Executive Director of the Energy Medicine Professional Association and your host for this edition of Energy Magazine's exclusive interview series. I am super excited to be speaking today with one of our wonderful authors, Courtney Francis. Courtney's an advanced crystal master and has what seems to me anyway an extraordinary understanding of and relationship with our crystal friends. She's also a spiritual mentor and a crystal medium and helps the spiritually curious unlock the power of their divine gifts using crystals and her own clear, down-to-earth approach. Courtney helps her clients find their inner magic so they can feel confident when they're sharing their spiritual gifts with others. She runs classes and also works with individuals and groups and has a lot of information and some gorgeous crystals on her website, which is courtneyscrystals.com. We'll have that in the interview notes for you. Courtney, oh my gosh, I'm already so excited to be here with you and to be talking and to all, have your crystals around us and joining us for this interview.
Oh, thank you. The honor is all mine. I am so happy to be here. I'm a huge fan of Energy Magazine and everything that they do. So, pleasure is mine.
Oh, yay, we are going to have fun. You speak so beautifully about how you help people, particularly women, to really uncover and share their spiritual gifts. So, what I'd love to start with is what do you consider spiritual gifts to be, and why is it so important that we find what they are?
Absolutely. So, spiritual gifts can really be anything. I put the term spiritual in front of it because I tend to talk to people in a spiritual capacity. But what I find is that they're the things that help, they're closely intertwined with our life's purpose. And also, why it's important to find them is that if you're feeling like there's a little bit unfulfilled or there's something more that you have to offer in the world, it's likely that you have a spiritual gift that hasn't been unlocked yet. And so these can be anything. A lot of times, the more common ones are being a psychic or a medium, the things that people think of top of mind when they think spiritual and gift. But it could be anything from being prophetic to being a teacher or a healer. There's a lot of energy healers, people with great body wisdom work that they do that I work with. My gift is probably sounds a little more unusual to people being a crystal medium. But I even had somebody who realized she was in the aromatherapy space and a very talented aromatherapist, but her actual spiritual gift was about creating websites and helping people build containers for their digital presence. And her clients were aromatherapists. And so that was kind of the connection to it all. She's like, it feels spiritual in nature, but I really like the tech stuff and helping aromatherapists build their business with their websites and their social media presence. So it can really be anything.
That just sounds amazing. And part of what I'm hearing is sort of started using the word spiritual there because that's where a lot of this was going with your clients. But it feels like there's even that idea where isn't everything, spiritual in some way, right? Even supporting others with their web presence or whatever it might be, if it's our heart's calling or what we're meant to do. I mean, what I think I'm hearing you say is like that's the spiritual
Absolutely.
gift.
Absolutely. It's that like heart connection. It's getting connected with your soul and kind of like, yeah, that's a beautiful way to say it. It's how you want to express yourself here on earth and in this physical body, this beautiful body that we all have. It's the universe gives you all these amazing tools. But what I found is that the universe gives you these tools because you're going to be called upon to use them someday. And the tools are your gifts. And then the work that you do gets to be your expression of that. And so what's really cool too is when people start unlocking their gifts, it's not just to help them with their spirituality, it's to help them in their everyday life too. So it's to help them. A lot of times people find out once they've reached a higher level of fulfillment by unlocking their gifts. They have better relationships with people. They sometimes have more relationships because they're finding people that are really in sync with them. But they can also grow your career and your business. It doesn't always have to be a spiritual expression of a divinely given gift.
You know, from an energy perspective, also, which I know we're both very involved in, um, when I am more aligned, right, more attuned or expressing more of self, however we might want to say that, the energy changes and that will change everything else, right, in our life. So the relationships change, like you're saying, all sorts of things in life might change. What do you notice is going on for people when they're maybe not yet aware of what these gifts are for them?
A lot of times, by the time they find me, they have a curiosity.
Mm.
That's like the common link. Is there like there's like just something they're like, I don't know what it is. But there's something like the feedback I get so often is like, I feel like there's something more that I have to give. Or sometimes if they're really stuck, they come to me and they're like, I just feel really blocked. I feel like there's not a lot of momentum in my life. I'm just kind of in this stuck point and nothing seems to be moving forward. So can it be anything from like hopeful and curious to, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do next. I'm just stuck.
What boy, we could go so many places, but we have
Right.
not all day. I'm curious how you got started in this yourself, right? And helping other people to discover their own gifts.
I love answering that question. So, and partially because it kind of links everything together because I started my career in corporate America. So I did brand and marketing and did a lot of consulting work, advising CEOs of like big Fortune 500 companies and startups across multiple different industries. And then I decided that I wanted to have my own business. So I opened up a business consulting firm. And then I was a solopreneur, so it wasn't like this huge thing, but it was kind of fun because I got to experiment with it. And one thing that I was just always drawn to, especially working in corporate and in business, is I would always look, especially for women. I'm a woman, so I always wanted to like find female mentors and things like that, and women I could look up to because a lot of them had a lot of work that they had to do to break the glass ceiling and be successful. And so I really admired a lot of those people who had to do some of the hard work before me. And so I'd often talk to them and tell them how much I appreciated them and talk about the specific things that I admired, their gifts. And what I found interesting is a lot of those women were just taken aback. It wasn't feedback that they had heard. And so they didn't even necessarily always know all the time that they had these gifts. So it became my mission to help bring those out and other people, especially women, because a lot of times we're just expected to like fill a specific role. And in certain situations, it's not always praised, or you're not always told what your strengths are, or it's in a very corporate way, so you don't see the full picture of it. And so when I started my own consulting business, I also got very, very into my spirituality. I've always been a spiritual person, but it just became like, I was like, I want my business because I want to spend a lot of time developing personal and spiritual goals that I had. And as I became more spiritual, my clients did too. And so that's kind of how it all came together. And also why I love helping people not only find their spiritual gifts, but use them to help them make their lives better and feel more fulfilled. And so they feel happier.
Wow. I'm curious what the connection here is with the crystals. Clearly, you've got a vision, right? And you're able to see and identify some of the gifts that sounds like people maybe not aren't even completely aware of themselves. Mm-hmm. So, tell me how the crystals fit into this.
So the crystals, they kind of helped me realize that I was special and gifted too. So when I was doing my spiritual journey, and we had talked about this a little bit earlier too, but when I was starting my spiritual journey, I love crystals. I was always attracted to them as a kid. I would go into we didn't really have metaphysical stores where I grew up, or new age stores. It was very conservative. So it'd be like a natural store, something that was more like geologically based. And I would beg my parents for like different crystals and rocks and things like that. And they're like, oh my God, if you want rocks, just go get them in our backyard. We're not spending money on rocks and crystals and stuff. So the compromise was turquoise jewelry. And so as a kid, I was like kind of given just fenced in into certain parameters of how I could explore some of my interests, but I get it. I'm one of four in a conservative family. I get it. But as I started doing my spiritual work, I was like, okay, so I'm still obsessed with these crystal things and I want to figure out more about them. But I kind of go into a store, be really overwhelmed, and then run out. And I would then go with a friend and I would say, hey, like, can you help me pick out a crystal? And she'd be like, oh, can you feel the energy coming off of this one? And I'd hold it and I'm like, no. So I actually thought that I was never destined to really work with crystals or feel their energy, but I don't take hints very well. So I still started collecting a few and, trying to find teachers that I could learn more about crystals from and reading books. And kind of through trial and error and practice and working with different teachers. And actually, it was through once I became Reiki attuned is when like the energies really started opening up for me. And so I got introduced to crystal healing. And then that's when I realized I had this gift to connect with crystals. It was kind of like working with other people that I could actually sit. I started getting these crazy visions and some very, what's the right word? Demanding, perhaps, spirits would come to me and tell me that they had messages for my clients and insisted that I would share them then with my clients. And I was kind of too afraid to say, no, I'm not going to share that information. So I started passing these messages along. And my clients were like, oh my God, how did you know that? And it's then I started realizing that number one, I could sense the energy of crystals. It just wasn't in the way that I expected it. Like I couldn't necessarily feel the vibrations, although now that I'm more sensitive to it, I certainly can. But also that I had this gift where I could connect deeply with another person's energy through energy work and the crystals. And it just really, I don't know, it feels like it opened up something here, like in my intuition and my crown chakras, where I could get these really powerful intuitive messages for my clients.
So, what a journey, my goodness. My goodness, from rocks in the backyard to this.
Who knew?
When you say that you're a crystal medium, is this the type of thing that you're talking about, getting these messages, or tell me a little bit more about what that means?
So I am a traditional medium in the sense that so a lot of people take the word medium to mean that you talk to people that are deceased,
Right.
which I can do, but it's actually not necessarily my favorite thing to do because it's very intimate and I'm also working with energies that I'm not as familiar with. And so what I found is that by working with, so I found a broader definition of medium that says someone that talks to spirits. And so that's very, very broad. And so the way I view crystals and their energy is that they have spirits, they have consciousness, they have information and messages that they want to share with people. And so what I do is I connect with that consciousness within a crystal and I get messages that come through from each different crystal. And then I have what I call him a crystal liaison. So he's like my main guy. So if somebody asks me to get certain messages from other people, I feel a lot safer having a spiritual, like an extra layer of spiritual protection, if you will, to kind of go into the unknown. And we can sometimes venture together. Other times he's just more of a goes and gets the information and shares it to me.
That's fascinating. It reminds me in some ways of the journeying persons in some of the shamanic traditions, where you have a guide who will take you or to go get information rather than you just going anywhere. Um, wow, I this is so fascinating. So as you're tuning in with the crystals, do they have a particular relationship with the client, or are they, bringing certain information to illuminate something that the client might not already know? What what do you find from that that's most helpful or most uh, illuminating or awakening for your clients?
It depends. Well, it's kind of why I do the work that I do. And I love doing like one-on-one sessions and things like that because it depends on the client. So some people come to me and they're like, I really love this crystal and I want to know more about it and how I can have a relationship with it. And in that case, I always ask permission and I'm trying to think, as long as the person who owns it is okay with me tapping in, I've never had an issue tapping in and being able to like feel or sense the energy of it. and providing messages. Sometimes I work with clients who are interested in channeling sessions, but they're like, I don't really have any crystals I want to bring to the session. And that's kind of how my crystal liaison came forward, is so he can help. And also, we have such a deep relationship. He knows how to communicate with me in a way that makes sense. And so then I can translate that information to my clients. But I never know what's going to happen. A lot of times my clients will come in with a certain intention in mind. And I always try to, just be considerate of their wishes and fulfill that. But a lot of times the conversation just goes in these very tangential or almost like organic patterns where we actually uncover something completely different, or a message will come through so strongly. I'm like, I know this is off topic, but I have to share this with you. And a lot of times that tends to be, I don't want to say the word prophetic perhaps, but a lot of times it's about, I'm trying to make certain decisions in my life and I'm not sure what's going to happen. And so we talk about the future possibilities, and I can kind of work with the crystals to say, yes, this is probably a good option for you, or based on what you say you want, this might not be setting you up for the success that you think it will. But it's always up to my clients. Like, I'm also big about free will. So even though I can get a sense of things, I'm like, it's always up to you.
That's beautiful and very empowering. Very empowering, especially as your client is discovering their gifts and moving into some of those choices. I'm getting this sense from all you're saying that this is a very intimate container where you're working with people, and that there might be things that are very deep, very unconscious at this point. So I'm curious about the sense of feeling safe, the sort of, what kind of protection your clients might feel like. How do you help them be in a space where this is able to happen?
So part of it, like as a practitioner, I feel like it's my responsibility. If I'm working with somebody one-on-one, it's my responsibility to give them a safe space, and also let them know that no matter where they go, I'm going to be here to help keep them grounded. So I do highly recommend to anybody who's interested in developing their spiritual gifts to find a teacher or at least a group of people that are curious and exploring different things that you're also interested in. But the most important part of that is grounding and being able to distinguish between what's happening in a more spiritual space. Sometimes I call it the invisible, versus here on earth, like the physical, the things that you can see and feel and move around in. Because some of my clients are all of my clients are extremely gifted, but sometimes they get very into guided meditation work that we're doing or some healing work. And it can kind of be easy to get lost, especially if you're dealing with some things where spirituality is kind of this escape. It's really important to have grounding tools with you. And that's also where crystals come into play. I do a lot of online work, so I always recommend that my clients find a crystal that they also feel safe with that helps that protection. So I'll show a couple if you don't mind.
Sure.
So one that I recommend, this is a raw piece of black tourmaline.
Oh, that's cool. Wow, I can feel that.
Yeah, isn't this nice?
Wow.
Very, very grounding. It's also really great for like anxiety and overwhelm. So one thing a lot of people don't think about when if you're having a hard time dropping into meditations or shamanic journeying practices, sometimes it's because our brain won't shut off and having anxious thoughts. So black tourmaline is really nice for that. It also, I'm going to nerd out for just 1 second.
Please.
But
That's what we're here for.
It has a high concentration of iron too, so it's a little bit heavier than it looks. So if you're looking at the black stones in a crystal section and you're not sure what's what, kind of pick them up and feel, and black tourmaline will be a bit heavier than it looks, which is nice for grounding. And then another one that I recommend, this is garnet. So I'm not sure if the color picks up on Zoom.
Not so much. It looks more black, but a garnet is a deep red, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Exactly. So when it's in a big hunk like this, it'll come off as more like black or brown. But if you look closely, you can kind of see some of the veining in here where it's red. But again, this is another stone, especially in this size, where it's a little bit heavier than you would expect. And it also is a nice heart connection. So it's a heart and root chakra connection, helping you feel loved and supported. And so these are nice crystals to have next to you whenever you're trying to tap into a spiritual space where you can still feel that, you can still get enough elevation and enough of the energy to tap into spirit and have these amazing experiences, but still feel tethered and grounded. And like I mentioned, I love to use different crystal energies to help navigate different spiritual spaces, especially if I feel like I'm going somewhere that I haven't gone before or working with somebody that I haven't worked with before.
Well, and it also sounds from what you're saying, like let's say I'm a client and I'm in the process of uncovering my gifts or getting comfortable with sharing them, which sounds like it's part of what you're doing also. Then there could be crystals, it sounds like, that could be helpful to me in my own process there as well as I'm unfolding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I brought some of those as well. So one that I recommend, especially like with if you have a hard time deciphering messages from spirit and understanding what's going on, Aquamarine. This is a gem quality one, so it doesn't have to exactly look like this, but very beautiful.
That is stunning.
You can get tumbles. Usually, if you can't find it at your local metaphysical or new age shop, you can find it online. But aquamarine is just a really nice crystal for clarity. It's also extremely high vibrational, so it's nice to connect with spirit guides and things like that. And then to develop your spiritual gifts, this is kind of a gemmy piece. It's a little bit smaller than what you might normally see, but this is azurite with a little bit of malachite. But azurite is this really powerful third eye crystal that like will kind of make your intuition explode if you will. So if you're feeling stuck or blocked or you want to develop your spiritual gifts, this is a really phenomenal crystal. And I recommend putting it directly on your third eye, especially if you feel like your hands aren't super sensitive. Finding a chakra that's a little bit more open and receptive to energy is really helpful. And so spiritual gifts tend to lie in your third eye, sometimes your crown. So you can kind of play with the energies and see, play with crystals, put them on different parts of your body to see what awakens.
So, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. And so fun because what I'm hearing is all these different pieces are coming together. There's the awareness, there are the crystals, there are the different ways of knowing, the
Yeah.
different ways of sensing energy, the different, maybe it's in our hands, maybe it's at the third eye, maybe it's a knowing or a seeing, like we had talked about previously.
Yeah.
Um, that there really is room for all of this, even in the relationship with the crystals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that I love talking to people. Like I built a class around sensing the energy of crystals, which you can apply to anything. And so it's exactly what you talked about. I call them the clairs. So it's the, if you're familiar with clairvoyance, just because a lot of spiritual people are at least somewhat familiar with one or two.
Sure.
Clairvoyance means clear seeing. So it's the ability to give visual messages from spirit. A lot of people also connect it to psychic abilities. I tend to not, just because of the way that I teach people things for clarity's sake, but otherwise I'm flexible. There's clairaudience to teach you to hear messages, like where kind of you can actually clearly hear spirit talking to you. And I think you and I both are similar. Like sometimes we'll like intuitively feel, or sometimes just know information, which is clairsentience and claircognizance. And those are the two trickier ones that a lot of times we're actually taught that it's probably the thing. It's like, oh, you can't know that, or you can't really like, how do you like, that doesn't make any sense. There's no way you can know that. You need to prove it with logic and reason. And so a lot of times these, we don't know that we're sensing energies because we've been told for so long by so many people it's not real. So it's almost that revalidation process of no, this is really real what you're experiencing.
Wow. So it's interesting because I'm hearing you talk about how you're helping people identify their gifts and bring them forward, but also really how you're helping them to see this whole other set of gifts that they may have, right? I mean, maybe someone's a great web designer for people in the holistic space, and they also have an extra way of knowing, right? And they have these other capacities, these other senses, if you will.
Yes. So the way that I try to create, again, I like it to be an organic experience. So if labels and putting things in buckets doesn't work for you, kind of ignore this. But what I like to think about is a lot of people are like, oh, your clairs are your gifts. So the things that I mentioned, the clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance are your gifts. The way I kind of think about it, it's the way you interact with spirit and energy around you. And so they're more like communication tools. And so you think about your five senses being elevated. And then on top of that, and they can be gifts in of themselves. I don't want to deny people that. But on top of that, then you have these like nuance, like all these nuanced special abilities and talents and things that can be brought forward. And you can call it like an X factor, if you will. So it's a combination of all these things, the way you communicate with spirit, the way that you experience things, your talents and abilities all come together and create this really interesting X factor, this special gift that can be shared with the world. And that's what makes you special and individually you. You might share other gifts with people like the clairs. You'll probably meet other mediums, other psychics, other people that can feel or see energy, but it's the combination that makes it like uniquely you and very, very special.
Wow. So, as people are engaging in the process of exploring their special gifts, maybe using these clairs,
Yeah.
maybe some other method, right? Through whatever communication that they have, what are some of the things that you might suggest they be aware of, or what should they know as they're in this process of exploring, finding their gifts?
To be open. Like that's the biggest thing is to be open to the experience. I'm going to kind of talk about the blocks, what I see as blocks and things to
Sure.
avoid. So a lot of times what I see is that people don't feel like they have certain gifts or the ability to connect in certain ways because they want their experience to be like somebody else's. And there's so many talented teachers out there, but a lot of times what teachers will do is they'll teach you a specific gift, and it's usually very similar to what they have. So if it's not working for you, don't get discouraged. Also, that teacher is probably phenomenal at what they do, but you are probably expecting your experience to be exactly like somebody else's. And so that's when you're like, oh, well, I guess I'm not gifted in that way. And it tends to shut things down. And so feelings of stuckness or blockness come through. The other thing that I see a lot of people do is not give credit where credit is due in terms of energy sensitivity. They think, oh, well, the energy I sense is really subtle. So they equate that subtlety with not powerful. Coming from a place of zero energy sensitivity is something that could be practiced and built on. But if you have subtle energy, oh my gosh, there's so much to work with when you have subtle energy. It's learning to listen to things when they're not always over the top or loud, or like you probably watch shows where people have like a visceral experience to the energy that's around them and they might shake or move in certain ways. And that can be a gift in of itself. They're more kinesthetic than other people. But just because it's a little more subtle and a little more quiet doesn't mean it means that you're actually picking up on something. And we just want to turn up that volume through different practices and things that you can do to be more sensitive to it and start appreciating what you're actually receiving instead of wishing it was more or better or like somebody else's.
I have several stories of my getting shut down because I was wishing I had it like someone else. So,
Yeah.
yes, right? Yes, on that. My mother, I'm sure she's fine. My mother gets uh, she gets this information on what we call her inner IMAX. So it's this whole big screen and just information just comes. And I thought, well, I don't get that. I don't get that. Right? But of course, we each have our own way. One of the things I'm loving about what you're saying is it sounds like you're really helping people identify their spiritual gifts and really get in tune with their own ways of knowing and really to honor their own ways of knowing, whether it's something really unmistakable like a big IMAX screen in your head, or whether it's something incredibly subtle like a little whiff or just a little sense of something, that it's really the same thing, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly. There can be power in both. It's just so even if it's like a whisper or like sometimes it'll be just like almost a very slight tingle on your shoulder. Again, it's depending on what your gifts are, but there's so much power in that and there's so much information in that. I think what I see a lot of times is that when people start giving themselves credit for what they're actually experiencing, they realize it's powerful in its own way and that there's actually more there and they're more energy sensitive than they think they are. Like they'll have people wishing they were like, so for example, I don't know if you have any children or like nieces and nephews, but maybe they wish their gifts express themselves in the way that yours do.
Perhaps. Maybe not, but maybe.
Maybe one day.
Exactly. Maybe one day. So I've got two questions um, remaining because I know our time is coming to a close. How do you suggest that if people are at that stage of identifying their gifts, or maybe, I know what they are, but I'm still not all the way there. What counsel do you have for people wanting to amplify or really dive into their gifts further?
Yeah, so there's a couple things in that question I want to address, but I'll try to do it concisely. So the first is if you're trying to identify your gifts and figure out what they are, one thing I love telling people is to follow your heart. It's exactly what we talked about before. A lot of people feel like, oh, I've been given this set of tools and these are the things that I see and I recognize, so I have to work with what I've got. But I tell people to work with what's placed on your heart in terms of discovering your gifts, because if you have a desire and a passion to learn something more, if something sparks your curiosity, that's a good hint that there's a gift there to be uncovered. And then in terms of amplifying gifts, that was the second part of the question, correct? In
Yeah.
terms of amplifying gifts, I recommend just overall. So I've kind of talked about some crystals. There's a lot more that you can use, but that's a good starting point. Third eye and crown chakra crystals, which tend to be uh, blue, clear, and purple. So anything in that genre can help you out crystal wise. But I recommend creating a 5 minute or less spiritual practice that you can do every day. So I love working with crystals. So a lot of times I'll just lay them on my body and go into meditation. I have a client that loves talking to spirit via pendulum. So that's how she senses energy. So that's more of a kinesthetic gift, is being able to use a pendulum to in a dowsing board, like almost like a Ouija board, the divination board, to get letters and things like that, and have full on conversations with spirit. She does that every morning before her family wakes up.
Wow.
Another good one for developing just general intuition is that if you like pulling oracle cards or tarot cards, is before you take a look at the card to try to guess what's on it. And if you're starting out, I don't recommend guessing exactly what card it is because you want to build up your gifts. That's part of the amplification piece, but you can kind of guess what colors are on it, maybe shapes, symbols, and then build your way up. I know some people who are like become super proficient at it and are able to guess the cards after a while. But it's all about having fun with it, getting creative, making it yours. And if you find that it's too competitive, like if you're going to have 5 days in a row where you're doing the oracle card trick and you get them all wrong and it's going to be frustrating and disappointing, find something else, because it's meant to be playful and exciting and allowing yourself to have a human experience where sometimes your gifts are just firing on all cylinders, and sometimes just, especially when things around you energetically aren't coming together, is sometimes when you have more like misreads, or when you're doing the oracle card trick, for example, maybe it's even the moon cycle where it's like, I'm not getting anything right. So play, patience, giving yourself grace around whatever spiritual practice you want to do every day, but do it every day if you can. And if not, the best you can after that.
And that's beautiful advice, and I'm struck by your emphasis of the idea of play, right? It feels like it gives so much space, and I really also feel that energy from you as we talk, that there's a lightness, a playfulness, a willingness to explore and engage, and such a big heart. It feels like that's probably something very well in your work as well.
Thank you. That's so kind. I mean, I hope that comes through, because I think that's a point of spiritual gifts too. A lot of people, like, you can take it seriously for sure. I'm not saying don't take it seriously, but having fun with it and finding playfulness in it is what's really, really exciting about the journey. So as soon as it stops being fun, you stop fulfilling your life's purpose and the whole point of your gifts. So I kind of feel like you must have fun. If you must do anything.
We can get intense even about having fun.
Exactly, right?
Courtney, this has just been such a delight speaking with you. I am really struck by how you bring together all these different pieces and are really supporting people in bringing their own personal gifts to discover them and really bring them out to the world. Any last words or advice you'd like to offer to our listeners today?
Oh gosh, I probably already did it with, just having fun with it and allowing yourself some grace and excitement. Allow yourself to sometimes, within ethical parameters, but allow yourself to break all the rules while you're playing and experimenting and contradict maybe some of the things that you've been taught growing up in terms of, oh, that's not real. Well, what if it is? So play, explore, and believe in yourself. Like,
Yeah, that's a thing for a lot of people, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Courtney, I'm so excited. It's been so much fun. We can do this all day. Thank you for sharing your crystals. Thank you for sharing your gifts with us. And it's a pleasure. We wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you to our Energy Magazine subscribers and readers, and to everyone who is also enjoying what Courtney is bringing to us today. Thank you.